The bilateral relations between China and Kenya date back to the 14th of December 1963, which was 2 days after the establishment of independence, when China became the fourth country to open an embassy in Nairobi, Kenya in the past decade. In 2013, after the general election, the newly elected president Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta traveled to China, where he held talks with President Xi Jinping, and both signed deals worth $5 billion. In 2014, on a tour of Nairobi, Kenya, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang and the President Kenyatta signed 17 multi-billion-dollar deals to fund multiple infrastructure projects like the Standard Gauge Railway, and led to the establishment of the China-Africa Development Bank. It is important to note that President Uhuru Kenyatta increasingly looked towards China because when he was running for president in 2013, he had a case pending at the International Criminal Court at The Hague in the Netherlands in relation to the 2007 post-election violence, where he was mentioned as a key suspect with his running mate William Ruto, among others. The European Union warned that it would limit funding and diplomatic contact in general if he was elected president. The Mombasa-Nairobi Standard Gauge Railway is a railway that connects the port city of Mombasa to Nairobi, the country's capital and largest city. At a cost of $3.6 billion, it is Kenya's most expensive infrastructure project since independence. The main contractor is the China Road and Bridge Corporation. Phase 2A of the railway was launched in October 2016, extending the railway from Nairobi to Naivasha in the outskirts of Nairobi. China has loaned Kenya $5 billion to build these infrastructure projects. These projects would be viewed as risky by any traditional bank, but China is not financing these projects out of kindness. For each of them, there is a political goal. China is running out of growth potential. Its era of double-digit year-after-year GDP growth is over, as it is making the shift from industrializing to industrialized. Despite what politicians in Kenya say, there is empirical evidence that China has been using these infrastructure projects or investments to affect national politics. In addition, when a country votes overwhelmingly along with China in the United Nations General Assembly, they receive 1.8 more infrastructure projects compared to those who vote against China. As more Chinese-funded projects are commissioned in Kenya, the number of Chinese workers in Kenya is ballooning as well. This means that in the near future, the culture and beliefs of the Chinese is likely to spread across Kenya. Already, the Chinese news agency Xinhua has a big office in Kilimani, Nairobi, Kenya. Around the same area, there is a Chinatown too that has developed. In my research, I noted that President Uhuru Kenyatta commissioned a 27-kilometer expressway from the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, the main airport in Kenya, to James Gishuru, an avenue towards the western part of the city, at a cost of 62 billion shillings, financed by the Export and Import Bank of China. The project's contractor is the China Road and Bridge Company, which in addition has secured concession rights for 30 years, which means the government cannot come up with another project that will rival the expressway until 2049. Kenya currently imports more goods from China than it exports. At the same time, Kenya borrows increasingly from China. As the cost of living rises and unemployment rises, the future looks very terrible for Kenya. The Jubilee government has decided to bank on infrastructure-led growth to improve the economy, but infrastructure-led growth is an unsustainable model for economic growth. The current public debt stands at 5.4 trillion, Kenya shillings, which is 56.4% of the country's gross domestic product. In other words, the country owes more than half the value of its economic output. China's Belt and Road Initiative is the most ambitious infrastructure investment effort in history, whereby Kenya is the only African country in the initiative, and the port of Mombasa is a crucial part of the initiative. Recently, the Memorandum of Understanding between China and Kenya in relation to the standard gauge railway highlighted that the port of Mombasa will be used as collateral in the event of the default of any of these Chinese loans. When you sum up the full amount that needs to be paid back on these Chinese loans, you will notice that there is a high risk of default by the Kenyan government, and the Chinese knew this when they offered to finance these projects. The sovereignty of Kenya is at stake.